Well, let me welcome all of you to Chat with Matt. The purpose of Chat with Matt is to find people who have something to say. And today's guest speaker, Nick Corcodilos, is certainly someone I know for many, many years who always has something to say. And as I mentioned in one of my promotions for this event, Nick is on your side. Unlike many people out in the world of search, he is very much on your side, trying to level the playing field in every way he can. And when I saw the announcement about the law in New York City and New York State and California, I thought this would be an appropriate discussion for the two of us. We both have been dealing with people in HR and people at search firms, and one of the biggest things that one of the important things that always upsets me is that people won't tell you what the job pays. I don't know how they ever expect to get the right candidates. Nick has got his own website, Ask the Headhunter, and he has 9 books that he's published. You should visit his website, and I guess they're all ebooks. I'll let Nick tell you a little bit more about his background. No FENG meeting would be complete without someone providing their 90-second announcement. So with no further ado, I'm going to add Nick as a spotlight. And Nick, why don't you give us a quick thumbnail sketch on you?
Sure, Matt. It's great to be with you again. We've done these before. Thumbnail on me is I've been a headhunter since 1979. I started out in Silicon Valley after getting out of graduate school at Stanford, studying psychology and spending a lot of my time across the driveway at the business school, where I became quickly corrupted by a bunch of psychologists who were teaching business, and found myself working in Silicon Valley, recruiting engineers, technology people, up through executives. And what I've learned over the years, something very simple, and this is all I try to teach on my website, asktheheadhunter.com, and my PDF books, and that is, if you're not ready to walk into a manager's office and hands down demonstrate how you're going to bring profit to the bottom line, you have no business in the interview. So you need to prepare yourself to be able to do that. It's all about ROI. That's really the nutshell about me. I've answered about 50,000 questions from my readers over the years. The website's about 20 years old. So hopefully you have good questions for us.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to have a great discussion. When I first saw the announcement about the requiring companies to provide the salary range, I thought, wow, they finally figured out how to do this. This is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then I saw your blog posting about this topic, and I can see how the whole evil empire is going to set in again.
Well, what I ranted for years about is the fact that companies demand the job candidate's salary history, which I advise you never, ever, ever disclose, because once you do, your ability to negotiate goes right out the window. And yet job seekers from the lowest to the highest levels will argue with me until the cows come home that HR told me that they won't be able to allow me to proceed through my interviews if I don't tell them my salary. In my experience, and I've heard from thousands of my own members and subscribers, in fact, most companies will back off if you very politely but firmly explain to them, I don't disclose that because it's confidential. And the next thing you can add is, look, if you're not sure what I'm worth to you, I'll help you figure it out. Let's sit down and talk about what problems and challenges you're facing in your business that you would like me to fix, solve, make better, improve on. And if I can't demonstrate to you how I can bring profit to your bottom line, then you shouldn't hire me. If we just part company, we'll be friends. Maybe I can refer someone else to you, but I don't disclose my salary. That's really where all this really started, I think. And when the laws changed a few years ago, requiring companies to not ask for salary history, and that's only true in some states, of course. Now we've gone one step farther to requiring companies to disclose the salary range of a position. So where does that leave the job seeker?
Yeah, I have a search practice as well. And the only question, since my audience is primarily, is entirely members of the FENG, and it's an older group, my thought has always been, I don't really need to know what people's salary history is. I just need to know what kind of money they're looking for. they're at a different point in time in their lives. Maybe they had a job that required travel 4 out of 5 days, and maybe they had an outrageous boss. Who knows? My concern is two things. One, what kind of money they're looking for, because I always insist my clients provide me with a salary range. And number two, I ask how long they're planning to work. I really don't care how old they are, as long as they're planning to continue working.
Well, what I found is that people on the employer side tend to press on salary history because they want somewhere to start. And what I try to impress on job seekers when I tell them don't disclose your history, I also tell them in the next breath, it's really up to you to be able to express what you want. An employer, I think, has a right to hear from you about what you want so that they can figure out whether you're worth talking to, or are we all wasting our time. But by the same token, the candidate has a right, I believe, to know what the salary range is on the employer side so that we can do the same thing. And that's decide whether this is reasonable to continue with.
Yeah, I have always been mystified how companies, it's mostly corporations. I think search firms have typically been willing to provide a salary range when they post with us. But companies have been very secretive about it. And some of it goes back to things you talk about, where somehow they think they're going to get a bargain. And in this world, you really don't get any bargains. So I just can't believe that they're not going to take this law to their advantage and benefit from it, because it's one of the things of corporate stupidity I have always found.
Well, if you think about it, it's really the first hurdle to get over if you're going to decide to consider a candidate, if you're the employer. If you don't know that there's a fit on the salary range, why would you start this lengthy process? Because as you said, Matt, it's really this pie in the sky game. It's a fantasy. People think that they're going to get something that they're not going to be able to get. The longer you draw out the interview process without knowing that the money is within a reasonable range on both sides, you're really wasting your time.
Yeah, I think what's not well understood is the communication environment that we're in. My background is advertising and publishing, and the piece of communication that comes out on a job when it does, I believe that I've been reading job leads for 30 or 40 years, and it's almost impossible to figure out what a job should pay. So it's much easier if they just tell you, if they put some relevant range on it, and then we all know what we're talking about here. And it's, I think they miss candidates on both sides.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. I think when a company puts a range on a position, it tells the candidate something important, and that's that they know what their budget is, they know what they're looking for, they have a well-described position, it's well-defined, and hopefully if they can put a range on it that's relatively narrow, it doesn't have to be too narrow, but relatively narrow so it's realistic, that should tell you that they've defined the position in enough detail that they know what the position is really worth. Then it becomes a matter of you demonstrating that you'll fit.
Yeah, well, what I found is if you beat them with a rubber hose under a hot light, the salary range ends up being plus or minus 10%.
Yeah.
And why they can't just tell you that is still, it blows me away. I don't understand the logic of it. And I've had many, many discussions with HR people on this topic, and they just don't get it.
I've had HR people tell me that they get kudos and credit when they can hire somebody for less than the range that they secretly have set for themselves.
Yeah.
Because if they do that, they get more budget to go out and recruit again, which absolutely makes no sense, because what you're doing is looking for the lowest common denominator when you're recruiting. Yeah,
well, you're not going to get paid more than the president of the company as CFO, right? And you're probably going to make more than the controller who's working for you.
So I think it's important.
So there's a relevant range.
There is, and it should just be laid out and established so we can all talk about it.
Yeah. So with the passing of the law, how do you see HR people abusing this whole process?
Well, the simplest abuse is going to be publishing salary ranges that are something like $75,000 to $195,000.
Yeah,
and
wow.
Then they have plenty to work within, but what the problem becomes even if they publish a narrow range, a reasonable range, there's nothing in this law from what I've read. I'm not a lawyer. From what I've read, you can publish a narrow range for the job, and then you can still offer less or more.
Well, sure. Well, you can always do that. I've had clients put a job out at 150 and end up paying 200 because they found somebody, to your point earlier, who was going to create a greater benefit.
Sure. To get more nitpicky, apparently the only way a company can violate the law is if they don't publish the range.
Mhm.
As long as they publish a range, they can do whatever they want. If they're caught not publishing a range, apparently the first time they get a slap on the wrist, the second time it can be up to $250,000 fine.
Yeah, well, that's serious money, but they're just going to minimally comply, right?
Exactly.
Or maybe they'll see the benefit of this.
So the real question is,
I'm a real dreamer, Nick.
So what's the benefit to a job seeker? I think it's a little obvious and maybe almost kind of kooky. We haven't have to talk about it. And that's that a company that's complying with the law and publishing a reasonable range is telling the world, is telling job seekers, we take you seriously. We have some integrity. We take this responsibly. As a matter of fact, we'll publish some other things because we want to be a little bit more transparent than our competition is. Companies, I think, that you find are publishing reasonable, realistic ranges, I think you will find in general are going to behave better toward you than those that are playing games. So I think this kind of becomes almost a litmus test of a company.
Yeah.
Are they?
I don't know how they can position not complying with the law. Who is in a better position to know the value of a job to a company than the company?
Well, I think you probably know as well as I do that companies often slap salaries on jobs. They don't know what they're doing with the numbers. Even worse, they'll publish a job description that has very little to do with the actual job. In fact, when I do presentations and workshops at Wharton, Cornell's executive MBA program, UCLA, and what I find is that people in the audience have a sense that companies are almost always playing games as a routine.
Yeah.
They expect that. So a company that comes across as having integrity and being honest with you stands out almost immediately.
Yeah, I think they could use this as a real positive. That doesn't mean they will.
I would agree.
And I know in your audience, it's a lot more major corporations. The people who are in your audience are applying for jobs at major companies.
Right.
And they're really the ones who hesitate to publish salary ranges because they have so many people that it might affect.
I think this also gives job seekers or people going into interviews an opening to go back to what I was saying at the beginning when I introduced myself. And I said, I think you need to be able to walk into an interview and demonstrate how you're going to bring something to the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
The mere existence of this law gives you a way to break the ice. You can walk in the door and say, hey, I saw your published salary range. I've already spoken to your HR department about it. And I think what I'd like to try to do with your permission is actually walk through how I would do this work for you in a way that's going to pay off well. So
sure,
if I'm happy to do your interview, answer whatever questions you have about me. But if at some point during our meeting, you'd be kind enough to outline 3 or 4 challenges that you would want me to fix, challenges that I can meet, problems to fix, things you would want me to do. What's the outcome that you want from hiring me or anybody else? Now, let me show you briefly how I would go about doing that. Then you can estimate for yourself what my value is to you in this position. Because it's going to be different for various companies in various positions. So let's talk brass tacks about what that salary will pay for and why you ought to give me more.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Nick. I think a lot of the position descriptions that I've seen, not that they have nothing to do with the work to be done, but they don't really get into the reality of what it is a chief financial officer or controller needs to do within an organization.
Exactly.
As far as how they work and how they deal with their peers. A job description is just the bare bones mechanical stuff that has to get done.
I think knowing the range also gives you an opportunity to try to map it and test it against the actual job description. I poll people all the time and I ask them, the job you have today, the last job that you had, how similar is it today to the job description that you read when you applied for the position? Entire audiences will just start cackling and laughing their heads off because they know that the job 6 months into it is rarely what they expected from the job description in the interview when they first came in the door.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think if a company wants to be honest, when they come up with a range, they really need to be able to first define what the expectations and the deliverables are from the new hire. I think that forces them to
Yeah.
define.
And you don't often
clearly.
see those kinds of things in a job description. The deliverables. You don't often see them in a job description.
I find
That is something that's missing.
I find that rare. And I think that's frankly, a lot of the value that a good headhunter brings to an employer. It's helping them flesh that out.
Yeah, well, those are things generally you can only flesh out with a hiring manager, right? So first you have to get through all the HR people, and then you finally get to talk to the hiring manager, and you find out what the job is really entailing, and even they may not know, right?
Well, the second thing I was taught when I first started headhunting, Matt, was never talk to HR, only talk to hiring managers. Let the hiring manager take you to HR and explain to HR that they're going to be working with you to fill the position.
Yeah, no, it's so true. You.
I'd like to. I have a couple. Yeah, I have a couple of questions and comments that people made that I think are relevant now. One was everybody wants to know, when is the law actually going into effect? Do you know what is the actual date of that?
I believe the New York law takes effect at the beginning of the year.
Okay. And then there was a comment that I think I'd like you to talk to. It said that isn't the purpose of the law, or one of the purposes, I would edit that to say looking for pay equity, and especially like being transparent about the fact that there is gender inequity in a lot of jobs, and by doing this range, it's going to drive pay equity. So I just thought people are asking that, so why don't you speak to that?
From all of these,
actually, somebody said it went into effect November 1st.
I could be totally wrong.
It doesn't matter. We're just talking in general about the impact of a law. You know, everybody has to behave themselves. Okay, good. You have to pass a law for that? I didn't know that, but okay.
As we've watched these salary disclosure laws and laws that prohibit employers from asking salary history, I think what's very clear is that the female side of the world, in the professional world, has really given us all a gift. And that's that it really is all about pay equity. All these laws come from a need, a desire, a demand for salary equity, pay equity between men and women. So I agree with the person who just asked the question. That's where these laws come from. How they get shaped to benefit everyone remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think pay equity is certainly a hot topic these days, and Nick, you're welcome to comment on it. But it's more relevant to when there's several people at the same level who are doing effectively the same job, and some of them are getting paid differently. And you see, I saw this. This was always a constant in the world of work back in the day when I had a real job. Do you agree, Nick?
Oh, I do.
I mean, it's more relevant when there's a lot of people at the same level.
Well,
when there's only one CFO and one controller, you know, it's kind of hard to tell.
Well, what we could argue is that there are many CFOs and controllers across companies. But yeah, my response to that would be, I really believe that any particular job candidate or employee's worth varies across companies. You may be worth X to one company, and you may be worth 1.3X to another. Yeah. Depends on the position, it depends on the expectation, on the deliverables, on what you can actually accomplish. Mm-hmm. So figuring out what's a reasonable salary for someone and what's fair has never been an easy thing to figure out.
Yeah, I think there's a general misunderstanding among candidates that their value is not the same thing as the requirement for the job that they're trying to fill. So you could have a guy who's really worth, he's earned $400,000 a year. He's applying for a job that really pays $150 because that's the size of the company. That's the kind of the level of the responsibilities. And it's an unreasonable expectation that they're going to pay you what you're worth.
I recently started working with a guy who is a director of software development for a major company.
Mhm.
He takes down about $2 million a year. So,
Uh-huh.
so he's looking at jobs paying between 400,000 and 800,000.
Mhm.
So where's the equity in that? The problem is there aren't many jobs that pay $2 million a year for that kind of work.
Yes.
So it's all relative, and he realizes he'll probably have to take a significant cut to change jobs because his company is probably overpaying him. So what is his value really? It's all very relative, which is why I keep coming back to a basic idea. I think whatever your question or concern or problem with salary is,
Yeah.
I think what it comes back to in the end, Matt, is it's incumbent on you to be able to assess and figure out and research what a specific company's and managers' needs are. What problems and challenges do they face? And then to put together a small business plan that demonstrates how you're going to meet those challenges and obligations. And if you can show how you're going to do it and estimate how you're going to help financially, what you bring to the bottom line, that becomes your case for going to the high end of the range or even blowing the range away. It's a real challenge.
Yeah. So, in the world of work, we've got the two warring parties, right? We've got the employee, potential employee, and we've got the employer. And it is a bit of a dance, right? And with the idea that knowledge is power, how are take both sides and perhaps explain how each side can use the information they're getting to their best advantage. So let's start with the employee, the potential employee, the job candidate.
Once the potential employee knows what the range is,
Yeah.
let's back up a little bit. At what point does the potential employee find out what the range is?
Well, sadly, in the real world, it has often been very late in the process, which I don't think benefits anybody.
I don't either. So getting that information before you even apply, assuming it's published as it's supposed to be, gives you an advantage because it helps you weed out the companies you're applying to. On the employer side, if you're going to publish your range, you know that only people, as long as they're sane, only people who are going to fit into that range, be happy in that range, are going to come to you. So theoretically, once you implement this law, your HR department should have probably 90% of potential candidates disappear, which is a good thing. Because who wants to talk to people who are outside the range? HR loves doing that. The reason HR solicits thousands of resumes online for a position is because it gives them something to process. It justifies their existence.
Well, that's true. No, that's true. I've had conversations with people who use LinkedIn, for example, and they'll throw something out on LinkedIn, and they'll get 500 responses. 10 of which might fit what their requirements are because they didn't bother to put in the salary range.
A story. And,
people. I think if people see a posting that isn't serious, and you can react to this as well. If the company hasn't bothered to put in a salary range, well, shame on them. They're going to get buried, right? And it's hard to. How much time are you going to spend analyzing a position description where they haven't told you what they're thinking about? Money talks.
Let me give you an example of how bad it can be. This is a story I've told many times. Many years ago, one of my clients was a major investment company.
Uh-huh.
And I went, they hired me to go in and train the recruiters to do it like a headhunter. We want to do it like a headhunter. Show us how to do it, Nick. So for the next 6-8 weeks, twice a week, I would go and do these workshops. And when I first showed up, they said, "Oh, we're really excited." It was around the time job boards, MonsterCom, first one online, became popular.
Yeah.
Guess what? We're going to go on MonsterCom and post two positions in marketing. We're really excited. I said, "That's great." So I came in the next meeting and they said, "Well, you want to know what happened? We got 2,000 resumes. We're so excited." I said, "That's wonderful."
Yeah.
It turned into a shaggy dog story. By the end of the process, they're telling me each time I would go in, we got 2,000 resumes. Well, guess what? We've whittled it down to 100 candidates that we're screening on the phone. Wow, that's a lot of candidates. That's really good. Then they whittled it down to 20 people that are actually going to fly in from out of town to come interview for the job. By the end of the Shaggy Dog story and the end of my training period, they said to me, we want to ask you something. Give us your opinion. We got 2,000 resumes to start. We whittled it down to 10 candidates we looked at seriously. Out of those, 3 were finalists. We wound up not hiring any of them. Can you explain to us why that happened? How could that happen?
Yeah.
So, well, I said those resumes that you collected constitute junk mail. The junk mail, the people that you solicited without knowing who they were or why you were soliciting them. They came in over the transom. You didn't think about it. You weren't careful. You didn't hone down on a small population that was qualified. You published it, and anyone and everyone who could push the enter key, pushed the enter key. So you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
So
I could share with you that the other piece, it's not just salary range. Sometimes they don't even really tell you where the job is located. No, really, they New York Metro. I had a posting I did put up on our job board yesterday for a company in I think it was Denver. So the recruiter is sitting in Denver. Okay, so the job he posted as New York Metro. All right, because he's never been to the New York City area, and he doesn't know that if you live in Connecticut, you can't get to New Jersey except by crossing a couple of bridges, right? So New York Metro doesn't really help. And he happened to leave the name of the company on the file that he sent me, and I looked them up, and they're in Manhattan. I don't know why he put down New York Metro.
employers,
And there are people who won't commute into the city anymore, right? I can also tell you a story. I had a very nice CFO job at a pharmaceutical company on Long Island. Okay, so number one, pharma is New Jersey. Okay, not Long Island. And for all the people who live on Long Island, there's nobody. I have never had great success with jobs on Long Island. So I got as I do, I posted the salary range and I posted the location, and it was I posted even what part of Long Island. All right, I got 6 resumes and 5 of them were very good. Now I didn't go through 2,000 resumes, right? Because I was very specific, as you said. To go through 2,000 resumes, you got to be kidding me. I don't know how you even open up 2,000 resumes.
when LinkedIn and the job boards tell HR and the world that there are millions and millions of candidates available for you to pick from,
Yeah,
everyone starts to believe that more is better. HR believes
know.
that more is better, more resumes are better, more applicants are better. In fact, it's just the opposite. When you consider why a company retains a headhunter to fill a job, it's because they want 3 candidates. They don't want 2,000 resumes. They don't want 2,000.
yes, right.
So it's a question of accuracy, and where a company can use salary, location, what have you, as a filter,
Yeah.
so that they'll get fewer candidates rather than more. That's really the way this thing works.
Yes.
So if
Well,
you're a job seeker,
you
if you're a
put
job
up on-
seeker,
you brought up an interesting point, and I don't know that everybody picked up on it. But what does HR do, right? So unless they're getting a huge volume of resumes, and you can discuss this, maybe they're not doing their job. So because they're getting buried in, it's a vicious cycle, right? If they're not getting a lot of resumes, then they're not doing their job. So now if they get a lot of resumes, everybody's understaffed, right? There's no secretaries anymore. So now they have applicant tracking software, right? And they have screening tools for resumes. Your court, go ahead.
They have interviews by bots. HR, I've stood up in front of HR associations and I've said to them, folks, we need to change the way we pay you. You should be paid by the hire. And then you should get a bonus a year later based on how the hire has performed. We don't want to pay you based on how many people you process, because there's no correlation between that and our ability to hire good candidates.
Yeah,
So
there's a lot to that. They're looking, if they're Well, it was like when I was in the world of work and people were working well into the evening. Of course, they didn't come in till 10 o'clock, but they were working late, right? So the boss saw them still at their desk when he left at 7 o'clock, right? The fact that I left on time because I worked like crazy during the day didn't count. It's the same kind of thing with these HR people, right?
It is. And
They're getting that they think they're getting paid for the volume. And to your point, they're getting paid for the result.
from the job seeker standpoint,
Yeah,
if you're looking for positions and you're scanning the listings and the postings, and you find yourself starting a process with a company where they're behaving as though more is better, that's probably a good
Yeah.
reason for you to step away. Because if more is better, you're going to have more competition. And the competition will not be on meaningful criteria. It's going to be on make work criteria for HR because they feel they should have more candidates. How many times have I had people tell me,
from a mechanical standpoint, there's no other way to screen 2,000 resumes than arbitrarily.
oh, there is. You don't ask them or solicit them to begin with. I tell my clients, you're
Yes.
paying me a lot of money because I'm doing a good job for you. I'm bringing you a small number of highly qualified candidates, but you can do this for yourselves. Stop soliciting anyone and everyone who can send you a resume. Instead, pick out a highly targeted community of people
Yeah,
and go talk to them, meet them, go hang out with them. And I say the same thing to job seekers. It really works both ways. If you're going to plaster your resume all over Kingdom Come and apply for every job that sounds like it might be good for you, you think you're doing a smart thing because HR tells you more is better. In fact, if you step back and ask yourself, what defines the community of companies, employers that would profit from having me on board? What small number of companies can I actually walk in the door and show how I'm going to bring profit to the bottom line? Those are the ones to apply to. And do it through hiring managers, contacts in the company. I call it triangulating. People ask me, how do I get in the door? Only HR will talk to me. Well, what you do is you step back and triangulate. Ask yourself, who does business with this company other than employees? If you can meet an employee or a manager, that's wonderful. But who's their leasing company? Who are their consultants? Who are their attorneys? Who are their accountants?
yeah.
Who are their customers? Who are their vendors? Contact
Yeah, well,
those
and this
organizations
is-
and those individuals. That's how you get your introductions.
Right. And this is how HR hurts themselves all the time is if you know they're going to get 2,000 resumes, you're not going to put as much effort into researching them and knowing whether there's a good fit.
You can't, because if you're going
You
to apply
can't.
if you're going to apply for
Why
500
bother?
jobs, if you're going to apply for 500 jobs, there's actually an article on my website called "There Aren't 400 Jobs for You," and the idea is you send out 400 resumes or applications, and you wake up the next day and you rang the bell. You rang the bell. 200 companies have contacted you. They want to interview you next week. Can you walk in the door and do what I'm suggesting? And that is show them in 10 minutes up on the whiteboard or on a tablet or whatever. Show them in 10 minutes how you're going to do the job effectively. You can't do that with 200 companies. You can only do it maybe two or
Yes,
three.
right. Right.
So when
And-
you're selecting companies that you want to apply to, sit down and ask yourself, can I flesh out a business plan on the back of a napkin right now? If they wanted to interview me in 15 minutes, can I sketch something out that will look like a business plan for doing this job? If you can't, don't apply.
Yeah, I can tell you one of the things, there's a whole psychology with people applying for jobs. You know, when I talk to our members about what they're doing and how they're going about doing it. And so when I have an opportunity that I'm working on and I get somebody that I can read between the lines, I've been doing this so long, I know they can do the job, but they didn't really take the time. I'm picking up on your point. They really didn't take the time to tailor their resume to the position description I sent them. So if in my conversation with them, I feel they would be a good fit. Maybe they're local, I know the company and I know how they think. I will give them the name of the company and I will say, take your resume and take the position description and make whatever changes you think you need to make to sell into that job.
That's absolutely perfect.
That's what I
Absolutely
do.
Perfect. It's a lot of work. And
Yeah,
it should
well,
be a lot of work.
but at that point, for them, I think it's worth the time
Oh, it is. But it's
to
only
go
worth,
through. I said, you got a real shot at this. You're the only candidate.
it's only worth the
And sometimes
time.
that's true today. There's so few people left.
It's only worth the time if they have someone like you or me telling them you're a perfect fit, so do the resume right. Or if they're judging for themselves. If they're judging for themselves, you find a position on your own, there's no Matt, no Nick involved at all. Before you submit your resume, ask yourself, would it be worth my time to customize my resume to the point where I look like the only good candidate for the job? That's a lot of work. If it's not worth your time to do that, it's not a position you should be applying for. Life is short. Pick out companies that are shining lights, places where you would love to work. Only go after those. And only go after them if you're really willing to do that level of work. Because if they're going to pay you 200 grand, isn't it worth your time? Because this is not a lottery.
And Nick, wouldn't you say that if they put that time in and customize, they are 10 times more prepared to go in for that interview because they already know who they are and how that meshes with the company. They've already, kind of put that down on paper, and now it's really just a matter of selling themselves and their stories for that. Otherwise, they're walking in and they're selling this broad them, and that's not necessarily going to get them the job.
Exactly. This is why managers ask what I refer to as the top 10 stupid interview questions. If you could be any animal, what animal would you be? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Why are manhole covers round? We've all heard these questions, or a variety of them.
Yeah.
The one question managers don't ask, because they don't think about it really, because they don't know what the job really needs. One question to ask is, show me how you would do this work in a way that would pay off for you and for our company. So let's sit down and roll up our sleeves and have a working meeting. As a matter of fact, why don't you come into our next working meeting in a couple of days? We'll ask you to come in for an hour, meet with our team, where we're sitting reviewing a project that we're working on. We're obviously not going to disclose anything proprietary to you, and you can't ask us questions like that. But we want you to work with the team, show us how you fit, show us how you think, and how you would do this job profitably. Spend an hour with us. I would much rather do that than have a dopey interview where people are asking me canned questions. We all know managers, maybe ourselves.
Yeah.
You'll interview 7, 10 candidates in a day. By the end of the day, they're all the same. No one stands out. Something that I really try to impress on my readers and my subscribers, you need to do something to stand out. And that doesn't mean send your resume. In the old days, people say, oh, I'm going to send my resume in on a tape to a pizza box. I knew one guy hired someone who dressed up in a gorilla suit to deliver the resume. I stand out. That's bull. Standing out means walking in and actually starting to do the job in the interviews. You do the job to win the job. That's a tall order.
That's absolutely true. Very true.
Let me ask you a question here, Nick. With the tools that we've been talking about, and my audience, which is people who are older and perhaps more highly compensated than the position in front of them, what advice would you give them? They're applying for a job. They've been paid substantially more, but they see the job in front of them. They know what the range is. That would be okay, given what they understand the job involves and their life at this point. How would you suggest they position themselves?
So what you're saying is that they're willing to take a lower salary than they've been accustomed to.
Well, you don't want to use the word, I'm willing to take a lower salary. Those are bad words, aren't they?
Well, of course, no, I'm not suggesting anyone say that, but the fact of the matter is, you're asking me what advice would I give to someone in that situation?
Yeah, it kind of marries with your don't disclose your salary thing.
Of course.
Right. So now we've got the situation. Your resume is in front of HR. Since this law's been passed, they told you what the salary range is. So you kind of know what you're talking about here. And it's local. Maybe it's down the street from where you live, something. And you want to sell yourself into that job.
It's no different than any other situation.
Okay.
I've been teaching this stuff for over 20 years to my own candidates.
Yep.
To people in executive MBA programs around the country, to corporate people. I've been hired by companies to come in and teach their own managers how to compete for jobs internally. And And it always comes down to the same thing. Whether you're a kid getting your first job out of high school because you haven't been to college, or a PhD or an MBA, anyone, it all boils down to the same thing. You cannot do an interview effectively unless you know one thing. You need to know, you need to be able to look at that employer and ask them one question. Tell me where it hurts. Tell me where it hurts. If you can't find out where it hurts, you may have a quiver of 50 wonderfully sharp, wonderful arrows, all kinds of skills in your constellation set. You can't dump those all into an employer's lap. You can only use 2 or 3, and you can't pick those 2 or 3 unless you know what the employer needs. And needs all vary. They're always different. If you can hone in on those needs and address those specific things, your chances of winning are huge.
This is a core value of personal selling, which I fancy myself to know something about, is until you find out what you're selling into, don't talk.
Bingo.
Right? A good salesman doesn't start talking until he finds out what he's selling into.
I used to know a VP of sales who would literally do what I just described. He would spend a day with a prospect, and at the end of the day, they'd be sitting in the executive's office in easy chairs, and he would lean across the table. And he would say to me, I lean across the table, I wouldn't say a word for about 15 seconds. And then I would ask the manager, look them in the eye, and I would say to them, tell me where it hurts. And he said, Nick, the first reaction was, this is silly. This is corny. This is, where you at? That's ridiculous. They said, I wouldn't say a word. I might sit there for 30, 45, 60 seconds, not saying a word. And then I could see in their eyes that it was sinking in and they knew exactly what I was asking. And as soon as they opened their mouth to answer that question, he said, I knew I had the sale. As soon as they told me what they knew and where it hurt.
Given that where it hurts is something that you can deliver, right?
Oh, of course.
But that's okay. Right. So just so I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but the problem with job seekers typically is they know their product so well, and they do what in personal selling terms is called throwing up on the customer.
Yeah.
Which is what you were talking about. They immediately start selling things, all these quivers they have and arrows and stuff that the employer has no interest in, or not a lot of interest in. They're just interested in their own individual problems. And you have to find out what they are before you tell them how you're going to solve them.
I answer a lot of questions online from my readers. Periodically, someone, I'm happy to do it, and I do it in detail. I think I do it well. Periodically, someone will find my phone number and they'll call me up. They'll get me on the phone. Nick, I've been reading your stuff. It's great. I really love it. I'm looking for a job. This is what I do. Let me tell you about myself. Let me tell you about myself. And they launch. They can go on for 10 minutes. I've gotten so that I can pick them out now. And within a minute, I'll tell them, stop. I don't care who you are. I'm going to tell you what I tell people who ask, how do I do an elevator pitch? People do elevator pitches all the time. The elevator pitches never work. If I were an executive in an elevator, you got in and you gave me your 30-second elevator pitch, I would look you in the eye and I'd say to you, who cares? I don't need to know anything about you. You need to know about me so that you can address my needs. If you can tell me in 30 seconds how you're going to help my business, I'll take you back to my office and we can sit and talk longer. But if you can't tell me what my problems are, if you don't know what they are, what do I care where you went to school and how many years you've been doing what you're doing, what your accomplishments are, what your credentials are? It doesn't matter. What matters is whether you're targeting what I need. That's really.
I know. I know you're more involved in the job posting market and all that other stuff, but just to branch to networking for a minute, the reason why networking works is you're introduced to someone who someone thinks you will have a good conversation with. And since there's nothing on the table, they dump all their problems on you. No, really, that's why it works.
Oh, yeah, it is.
It's not an open, well, it's not an obvious thing for people. They right away go into their elevator pitch, right? They try to sell into a situation. If they just sat and listened to the person complain, they'd have plenty of meat to digest. They know what they're selling into.
My academic credentials are in cognitive psychology. And one of the fun facts from the world of cognitive psychology is that people who ask us about ourselves who people ask us about ourselves when they meet us, we later perceive these people as people we like more.
It's true.
We like people who get us to talk about ourselves. So
Right.
when you meet someone, when you're getting introduced, shut up and listen, because they
Yeah.
really want to tell you about themselves.
Yeah, well, my wife, who you just met, has many charming qualities, but the one I tease her about the most is she has this smile that says, "Tell me your life story. I'm really interested."
Now that works if you're the candidate meeting with the manager. It doesn't work if you're
No.
the candidate, if you're the manager meeting with the candidate and the candidate wants to tell you all about themselves. That just doesn't work.
Right, but it's about asking good questions, and it's about listening and building on that. But it is always about, and I tell my clients, the person you're talking to is listening to what's in it for me. And
Exactly.
if they keep that in mind, then it's about that person asking a good question. So if you're the candidate, if you're the manager, you would want to ask a question by giving this is a problem we have, or knowing that, or this is what we need. How could you do that? Now you're opening up but you're targeting that question. And if the person just starts to give what I like to think of as a verbal dump to let this person know everything I know, then it's sort of a closes the door. If that person listens and starts asking questions and building on it, then they're going to open up, and that manager is going to say, wow, this person has something of value to talk about.
Here's the magic question that I recommend to any job candidate ask in any job interview at some point during the meeting, especially if there's a lull or it doesn't seem to be going in the right direction. Stop and say to the manager, look, do me a favor. Would you please lay out a live problem or a challenge, something going on in your organization that you would want me to handle if you were to hire me? Don't tell me anything proprietary, obviously. Just lay something out that's really an issue for you, where it hurts, if you will. And let me try to show you over the next 5 or 10 minutes how I would go about doing it. And when you respond, you obviously got to be able to think fast on your feet. If you don't know anything, you can't do this. You have to be ready. What you want to do is lay out step by step how you would do the work. Maybe you explain, during the first week, I would do X. During the first month, I would accomplish this. During the next 3 to 6 months, these would be my objectives. If you can express that to a hiring manager, you will blow your competition out of the water like a bunch of dead fish. No one does this. Managers don't ask that question. It's all indirect assessment. They want to know behavioral interview questions. Were you ever in a situation where a customer got really upset with you and you had to do X, Y, Z? How did you handle it? Who cares? Tell me what you face in your job, in your company, a real live problem. Let me tell you how I would do that. In fact, I'd be happy to come in for half a day, because I've determined for myself that I've got a really good shot at this job and it's worth it. I'll come in for half a day and I'll work with your team so you can see how I would perform. It's a rare candidate who can do that in a job interview.
So in the 10 minutes we have left, Nick, I know I should really ask you about the meaning and purpose of life, but we'll do something a little easier. What do you see with regard to LinkedIn and the job posting boards, and how hopefully this new approach might positively affect it, or is LinkedIn and the job posting boards hopeless?
When I lived in Palo Alto, friends would come out from San Francisco.
By the way, you can mention your fight with the ladders. What was it, like 8 or 9 years ago?
We won't get into that.
Oh, okay.
When I lived in Palo Alto, friends would come from the East Coast. They'd want to see San Francisco, and we'd go visit San Francisco. And I want to go to Fisherman's Wharf, Nick. Let's go to Fisherman's Wharf. We don't want to go to Fisherman's Wharf. Oh, I really want to go to Fisherman's Wharf. We're not going to Fisherman's. Why? Why don't I want to go to Fisherman's Wharf? Because Fisherman's Wharf is a very clever thing that San Francisco government has done. They created this place that can herd all the tourists, keep them out of everybody else's way. It's the last place you want to go. It's a corral. This is where they all go. We're going to go to the fun spots, to the real spots. So when you're looking for jobs, when you're looking to hire people, either way, it works the same way, really. You want the LinkedIns, the job boards, they're all there to your benefit, because all the hordes, the teeming hordes of job seekers are all applying for those job postings, which leaves the front door of the company wide open for you. All you need is someone who knows the company to stand there and wave you in and introduce you. Your competition is low if you do this the way I'm suggesting, the way Matt's suggesting, because all your competition is off at Fisherman's Wharf. You're never gonna have to face them. They're all busy filling out forms, doing robo interviews online, having the robo interviews reviewed and analyzed by software. Meanwhile, you're getting introduced to a manager in the company. You have no competition. That's why it's worth investing the kind of time and effort in this. That's worth a $200,000 to $300,000 or $400,000 job. The LinkedIns, they're great. They serve to corral your competition. I really don't care what those companies are doing or what people who are using them are doing. They're wasting everyone's time. More is not better.
Yeah. Well, job leads, LinkedIn, and all this stuff. The value to the job seeker, in my opinion, is that it tells you what companies might be looking for. Never mind the job posting itself, right? The value of applying for it.
Right.
But if you see a job posting and it describes your background in a certain way, it gives you information you can use to correct your resume. You now know what things are being called. You know that there's demand for certain stuff, but to use it just for the purpose of applying to LinkedIn is a waste of time, right?
Let me talk about that for a minute. When I first got into headhunting in Palo Alto, my manager would have us, all the recruiters, pick up the San Jose Mercury News from Sunday and clip out job ads so we would know what positions are open, and then we'd go to those companies and peddle our candidates. But I learned something not long after. All my competition is doing that. They're all using these ads, the job postings, the LinkedIn postings, the LinkedIn profiles, what have you.
Mhm.
What I realized was if I picked up a copy of Microelectronic News, which is a newsletter in Silicon Valley at the time, if I pick up a copy of, in those days, it was worth reading, Forbes magazine, Business Week, industry publications that are specific to the industry that I was recruiting in, and read articles in those publications, that's even better, because now I'm getting detailed stories and analysis of what companies are doing. And I get the names of people who are the movers and shakers in those companies, and I can call them up. Today you can email them.
Yeah,
Find
we
them online.
live in a great time where everything is discoverable.
Exactly. You can discover what a company needs
With
by reading
younger
the
people,
news
I always
about
start with, you're not going to believe this, but
them.
there was a time when we had to go to the library to look this stuff up. You can sit at your computer and look stuff up. If you can find something relevant to your background, an industry publication of some kind, or if your target is private equity, for example, there's everything is announced somewhere.
Exactly.
And if you find a private equity group that is buying companies in your space, you want to do your research and find the movers and shakers.
Exactly. Then you can use LinkedIn to see if they have jobs posted. But you and I both know, most people probably know, the job you want to go after is the one that hasn't been posted yet. So if a PE firm is about to start a big project, you want to know about that. Maybe you'll read about that in a trade journal before you'll see it on LinkedIn. So now you're early in the door.
Now the private equity groups have no ability to find low-hanging fruit. There isn't any anymore. Every middle market company in America has been approached by 10 private equity groups, right? Yeah. So to find out what they're working on is key, and they don't practice age discrimination. Again, I'm speaking to my audience.
Sure.
If you want to look for a place where there's no age discrimination, large companies practice age discrimination. Okay, private equity groups, they will hire people in their late 60s and 70s if they can do the specific job they need done, because they just want their money back. They're very simple people. I love them.
I'll let you in a little secret. I think I've told you that.
So we have a few minutes left, and I'm sure we've had a provocative enough conversation. There must be some questions.
Well, I've been asking.
Not that we're going to stop talking.
I've been asking. Looking at the questions, I think I've been asking them as we went along. So I don't see anything really new that's here that we haven't asked. Somebody said that postings are from initial HR screenings, it's just like pulling teeth to get it arranged, but I think things are changing, and most of the conversations are, we've already had, there's nothing new. Somebody wants to know, but I think you asked, is the point of the law? No, I think we've got them all. I think we've covered all the questions.
All right, well, the point of the law, you want to comment, Nick?
The point of the law, someone pointed out at the very, very beginning, is pay equity for women.
Yes.
That's really where this all comes from. And if it will accomplish that even halfway, I'll be a very happy guy. If it will then overflow onto the males in the world and help them also be able to negotiate more effectively for jobs and select jobs more effectively without wasting their time, that's all of the good. And in the end, it's good for employers and companies, because they will stop wasting as much time as they have been.
Yeah, it's going to put a lot of HR people out of work if they narrow the fire hose that they're drinking from right now by doing the simple thing of telling people what the money is and where the job is located.
Do we have any other questions?
Somebody said, what was the story you were going to, it said, what is the story you were going to tell? You want to tell your story? You said, let me tell a story, and then you didn't.
Let me tell a story.
Said it said Nick wanted to share a secret. Did you remember what you were?
I've got stories of secrets to share.
All right, so
then 30 seconds later, something triggers another one.
So I have a question for you, Nick. Do you seriously believe you'll have nothing to complain about over the next piece of time?
Absolutely not.
You wouldn't be able to write anything in your column. If it wasn't for all these miscreants, you'd be out of work.
AskTheHeadhunter.com is my website. I have a newsletter that comes out every Tuesday night. Actually, it comes out Monday night late. You get it Tuesday in the morning, where I tackle a real live question from a real live person. If you have questions, I actually take real questions from real people. So if you've got questions we didn't get to here, email them to me at nick@asktheheadhunter.com, and I will consider them for inclusion in the column. And if they're questions that I can answer quickly, I'm always happy to dash off an answer and send it back to a reader, because I've gotten very good at it. But if you have questions we didn't get to, please feel free to send them in. I'd be happy to tackle them and possibly use them in the newsletter. Yep. The newsletter is free, by the way.
It's a good price.
We're up to issue 981. I've been doing the newsletter every Tuesday for the past 20 years. I don't plan to stop.
Well, I got you beat. I've been publishing 5 days a week
you
for
write a lot more than I
25
do.
years.
But you don't have 20.
You never run out of stuff to talk about. You know what I'm saying here, right? No, his newsletter is great. You have in the meeting announcement, asktheheadhunter.com. Go out to Nick's website, sign up for his newsletter. Take a quick look at all of his books. He's got 9 great books out there that will be very helpful to you in focusing your energies on finding meaningful work, which is what this is all about. Nick, any closing comments? There must be something we missed.
Oh, we could talk about a whole lot of things. Really, what I want to leave people with, this is not rocket science, folks. There's no such thing as job hunting skills. There's no such thing as job hunting skills. The skills that you use in your work are the skills you need to use in a job interview. The kind of research that you do in your work, as you put together a plan or whatever you're working on, that's the kind and the level of research you have to do, preparation you have to do in order to walk into a company and show them how you're going to help them out. Anybody that tells you have to have certain keywords on your resume, that you should be spending time fashioning a perfect LinkedIn profile, is bullshitting you. They don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. Nobody hires you for those things. They hire you for understanding what problem they have and for showing them how you're going to fix it. Imagine going into your boss's office, the CEO. You say to your CEO, gee, what do you want me to do next week? What should I be doing for the next 2 months? They'd smack you in the head and throw you out of their office. They expect you to come in and say, you know what? Here are 3 issues we need to deal with. Let's pick one that I should start with now. And let me explain to you how I think I should go about it, because I've done my homework. You tell me what you think, and we'll get to it. That's what a
there was
job
a question that
about.
popped up, Nick. There was a question that popped up that's worth discussing.
Sure.
Okay, so, and you're the expert at this. why you're very clear, never disclose your salary. But when pressed, people ask you, what's your salary? My quick answer is, well, what does the job pay? A lot of times people don't realize that answering a question with a question seems like an answer to people.
It can.
It can. They say, well, what are you looking, what's your past salary? Well, what does the job pay? And then they'll start talking. But, if you're cornered,
If
right?
you're cornered and they remain insistent.
How do you politely handle, the problem with job seekers is they take offense, right?
You be
And
honest.
you can't do that. So how do you delicately handle someone who's really pushing you hard for your salary?
You calmly and firmly say to them, my salary is a competitive secret. I'm going to have to negotiate with you at some point. So I'm not going to disclose it any more than you would probably disclose yours. But I promise you that if you interview me, I'll take whatever time is necessary to walk through whatever problems and challenges you're facing and outline for you how I'm going to tackle them. And if I can't demonstrate to you that I can do that effectively, you shouldn't want to hire me. But I believe it's incumbent on you to assess what I'm worth to you on this job. And I'm here to help you do that. I'm not here to tell you what my last employer paid me, because now if I want to get a little bit cute, what I'll tell them is, because where's your competitive edge if you're going to base a job offer to me on what my last employer was paying me? You
Well, I think
theoretically
that's a
were
little
better.
challenging. I would just say to them that I sort of understand what you're prepared to pay. You've given me a broad range, and the broad range is within what I'm thinking.
I have no problem with that, but I'm not interested in an answer that provides an answer. I'm interested in a response that generates more discussion and dialogue. I want to challenge the other person, and I'm always willing to walk away from that red Roadster on the car lot that I really, really want if I can't get it at the price that I want on the terms that I want. You have to be ready to walk out and walk away if the employer is not going to treat you with respect and isn't willing to understand and agree that your compensation is confidential. You have no reason to disclose it. Your obligation to them is to help them assess what you're worth to them. Whatever it takes. If it takes 3 days worth of interviews, it'll be 3 days of interviews, whatever you need. But for me to disclose my salary history to you is frankly nonsense. And if they find that offensive, I'm ready to walk out the door. I'm not willing to do business with people who want to play games with me. Because once you concede on that level.
Well, you have to find a polite way to say that, Nick.
You can
You
be
don't
as
want to wave
polite-
a red flag in front of somebody.
Listen, I never tell people to follow my advice exactly. If you
Okay.
follow my advice exactly, and it sinks you. I don't want you calling me up or emailing me and saying, Nick, this cost me a job. So always temper and leaven whatever I'm telling you with whatever good advice you have for yourself. Make sure you're comfortable with it. What I'm
Right.
trying to do is give you a sense of where your mind should be. Your mouth maybe should be saying things a little bit differently. But in your mind, what you should be thinking about is, they have no business asking me for this.
As they said in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, don't sugarcoat it, son. Butch, tell it to her straight.
I want you to
I
understand.
want to sugarcoat it a little bit.
I want you to understand what you should be thinking, because this is what reality is.
Yeah.
And you need to stand up for yourself. And again, if you're talking to a company that you really want to work for, and that's really serious about talking to you, they really need you, they're not going to worry about your salary. Most of the time,
Yeah.
trust me,
That's true.
this is what I get from my readers, that they tell me when I politely say, I'm sorry, I don't disclose that. Most of the time they tell me that the employer will stop. They get embarrassed. They would just stop asking.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, Nick, meetings should start and end on time. We're a little bit over, but Nick always has so much to say, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to be with us today. So the meeting's going to be recorded so you can create some envy among people who didn't attend. And Nick, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. So
Thank you for having me.
stay well, keep fighting the good fight, and we'll have you on Chat with Matt again in another few months. How's that?
Thanks to all of you for your kind hospitality. It's always fun to work with this group, no matter who you are.